Welcome, good morning, and thank you for joining. I'm Neve Marriott, and I'm the editor of Health Estate Journal magazine. I'm delighted to introduce this morning's webinar, Reimagining Compliance Management and Sustainability in Healthcare: How Smart Water Management is Shaping the Future of Safer Hospitals. There will be a live question and answer section at the end of the presentation. If you think of any questions you'd like to ask, please do pop them in the chat. Today's webinar is hosted by Susanna Adey, who is the Marketing Manager for Kohler Mairah Limited. She will be introducing the speakers. I will now pass you over to Susanna.
Welcome everyone to today's session on digital water management in healthcare estates. Today we're joined by Harry Evans, Independent Water Authorising Engineer and recently elected Chair of IHEAM, and Adrian Parker, Commercial Key Account Manager at RADA Controls. Adrian has 43 years of industry experience, including 33 years at RADA. He is a trusted specialist in the hospital and healthcare market. His expertise lies in delivering tailored solutions that meet the complex needs of healthcare environments. For over 90 years, RADA has been at the forefront of innovation, providing products and services that comply with the evolving standards of the NHS and private healthcare markets. They'll each be sharing their insights on how estates teams can make the most of digital water controls while maintaining safety and compliance. Let's start with our first question. Given today's advances in digital water management, how can estates teams ensure they're maintaining the safety benefits of digital control while minimising risks linked to stagnation and microbial growth? Harry, perhaps you can lead us on this one, and Adrian, please feel free to add your thoughts.
Certainly, Suzanne. So the way I see it, digital products can reduce the need to access high-risk areas such as isolation rooms, augmented care areas, where contamination from unnecessary individuals entering the room can be greatly reduced, because this can cause harm. It also reduces the burden on clinical staff and housekeeping and cleaners. Automation, digital logging can ensure that flushing is actually being carried out in all areas. Monitoring use can help identify low use outlets for removal or increasing the actual duty flush frequencies. It can also identify overused outlets and remove them from flushing. So if an outlet is being overused, it's being flushed a number of times a day, this can identify that, and you can reduce that flushing. So there's a great benefit there, I think, to these particular outlets.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the biggest benefits is for the facilities management teams, where they can automate a lot of their day-to-day activities without having to walk around the hospital and have everything done for them automatically. It saves loads of time, loads of expensive spare parts, bits and pieces that you would normally have to carry on a day-to-day basis. So the biggest advantage of digital for me is for FM teams.
Thank you both. And now, so Adrian, let's move on and looking at the bigger picture. How is the role of digital water management evolving within healthcare estates, and what key challenges are driving the shift?
I think it's not just the digital water management that evolves, it's actually the legislation and guidance notes that evolve. And one of the biggest advantages of having digital products is the flexibility to change what the products are doing, how that you're using those products to meet the requirements of legislation, guidance notes, and your day-to-day running of a building. There's a big misconception between digital and no-touch products. A no-touch product is a basic motorway service station tap. You pop your hand underneath it, it runs for 5 seconds, and away you go. The digital products allow you to alter the performance of the product and the output of the product in the way it delivers the water to meet the needs of what you're actually doing. It can identify the likes of underused outlets. It can identify where you're using a product a lot, where the tap's being used regularly. And its flexibility in programming and duty flushing in particular allows you to automate all of your compliance management and data logging and recording. But the other thing that the digital products can do is it's not just duty flushing on your blended water. You can get them to duty flush your cold water as well. And flushing the cold supply is just as important as flushing your blended or your hot supplies. Then, given that if you get a high TVC count, then the addition of having to be able to do a thermal disinfection means that you can control that without going into chlorine, or at least attempt to control it without going into chlorine dioxide dosing. And the ability to react to temperature change as well, to react to changes within the water quality. If you do your water checks on a quarterly, monthly, or how often you're doing your changes, if you suddenly get your water temp testing coming back with high TVC counts, you can adjust and change your duty flushing without too much disruption to anywhere within the building. It's simply a case of programming. So you might find that to get rid of high TVC counts, you might go to flushing 4 times a day, and that's easily achievable with digital products. Whereas if you've got a standard product, you're actually asking staff to walk around 3 or 4 times a day to go and duty flush taps, which is unnecessary. And then you've got potential for upgrading the digital products that we've also got that adds things like data logging, recording, and real-time clock to the actual products itself, which means that you can get duty flushing at a time of day that is suitable for everybody. So you don't get some countdown products or no touch products might provide you with a duty flush, but it's on a countdown clock, and that could go off at 3 o'clock in the morning. And if that's in a patient en suite, then they're not going to be very happy if the tap starts running on its own and there's a ghost in the room. So having the flexibility to choose a time of day, maybe 12 o'clock midday, maybe 6 o'clock in the morning, that you know that the product is going to duty flush and how long it's going to duty flush for, just makes it simpler and easier to use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Lots of benefits from a customer perspective. And then thinking about compliance. So Harry, can you talk us through, I guess, what are the biggest compliance pain points that estates and facilities teams currently face, and how can connected water systems alleviate them?
Well, Suzanne, with compliance of water systems, you've got to remember that hospitals are very large, complex buildings with very large pipework systems, sometimes covering many miles within a hospital. So the pain points is in many hospitals have paper systems, or others have software systems for logging the flushing and temperatures. And these can be problematic because they don't always get recorded correctly. Sometimes they don't get recorded at all, or sometimes they get lost. So when you're relying on, paper systems, the human factor is always a big problem. So digitally, we're relying on digital technology to log them for you is far more reliable, and it's real-time data, so it logs as the tap is actually undertaking the duty flush, so it's been done, not a paper system where somebody's flushing it and then ticking a box. So these are real benefits. And secondary disinfectants need to be pulled through as well. So even if your system is relatively well used, if there is some stagnation in the system and you've got a secondary system, then that system needs to be pulled through, that disinfectant needs to be pulled through to the outlet. So your digital controls can ensure that's undertaken correctly, especially in large hospitals where you've got many outlets that may be underused.
Mm-hmm. And then moving on to sustainability, obviously we know that safety and sustainability are really important, but balancing the two can be really complicated. So Adrian, what are your thoughts on this, and how can digital water controls support both water efficiency and the prevention of stagnation or Legionella risk?
Well, it's obviously highly important that you do your duty flushing just to prevent stagnation of water and to provide the scouring action of the water going through the pipe work to remove the likes of biofilm and to clean the pipes out as much as you possibly can. But there's also the fact that the NHS, it's estimated, use something like 50 billion litres of water a year, which is a lot of water. So by using digital, you can identify which outlets need duty flushing and which outlets don't. And then we can introduce the likes of smart flushing, which you can't do from non-digital taps. And what the smart flushing function will do is recognize when a product's been used. So if you're flushing one tap at 6 litres a minute for two minutes a day, then it sounds daft, but it suddenly adds up to over 4,000 litres a year for that particular tap. If you've got a large hospital or a large number of taps in, then by introducing smart flushing, you might find that you only need to use or duty flush potentially 50% of those. So it's an automatic saving on water and the amount of water that you're using within the building. You can also use digital to help move water around wards where you might not want to put digital in everywhere, but you need to keep the water flowing. And then using digital, you can introduce sentinel points. So at the end of each run, you can put in a digital product that will pull the water through to the end of the pipework runs for you. So it doesn't have to be everywhere, but you can adapt and use the digital product to help you run your building by moving the water around, but in a smart way without wasting water that doesn't need to be wasted. By identifying underused outlets, because digital allows you to recognize how often a product's been used, you can make a decision. If you find an outlet's not being used at all, or it's been used once in a blue moon, then you've got the potential, then you can take that outlet out. It doesn't need to be there if it's not being used. And if it's not being used, it becomes a potential dead leg. So digital will help you to identify those type of outlets. And because you know what the flow rate is through the product and how long it's being used, you can calculate just how much water you are using. So if you know a tap's been used 10 times a day for 2 minutes each time at 6 litres a minute, it's really quick and easy to work out just how much water you're using.
Mm-hmm. And following on from that, obviously there's a key benefit with water efficiency. There's also potential operational cost savings as well. So Adrian, can you talk us through that, how the integration of digital water controls can contribute to those operational cost savings?
Yeah, so if we introduce smart flushing rather than your standard set flushing, then you're automatically reducing the amount of water and energy you're using straight away. But it's not just the water and energy they're using. There's the staff hours, whoever's doing the duty flushing program, nursing staff, cleaners. That almost sounds as if it's a no cost, but it is a cost, because if a nurse is running around flushing taps, she's not doing what her day-to-day role is. If the cleaners are doing it, it takes longer for the cleaners to actually clean an outlet, and you're also not guaranteed that they're going to run it for long enough because they're moving from one part to the other. And estates teams basically struggle to find enough staff on a bigger hospital to get all around the site to do all the jobs they need to be doing. So if you can automate a process using digital products, you're saving staff hours, time and money. And then with the administration of the compliance logs, which have to be kept for 5 years, if you can automate that process and not make it a paper system, which can be automated and produced automatically for you, it takes all that management cost away. So somebody can then just click on a spreadsheet and you can pick up all your data logging and recording. And if somebody wants to view it, it's there for everybody to see.
Mm-hmm. And so data is, we know that data-driven monitoring is becoming really central to that compliance piece. Harry, what opportunities and risks come with increasing connectivity in water systems?
So opportunities, it's like assurance through automation that they provide, verification, the systems are actually being routinely flushed um, as set by the user, and these are logged. Early warning and trend analysis. So connectivity enables identification of underused outlets or inconsistent flushing patterns, allowing action to be undertaken before compliance and microbial risk occurs. If you look at risk, the system, if the system fails or the data is lost or corrupted, it can, it can undetermine both compliance and trust in the system. A digital record is only as good as the resilience and the backup strategy of the system. So cyber security, increased connectivity introduces potential attacks. Hospitals must ensure that water systems are protected with their digital infrastructure. So they must involve IT, because obviously cybersecurity is a big issue now, especially where you're using off-site remote monitoring. And they're what I see as the main issues.
Great, thank you. And then from a, I guess, sort of infrastructure perspective for existing and often aging healthcare buildings, Harry, what are the practical steps or barriers to retrofitting digital water controls effectively?
So I'd say, start small and smart. I think Adrian alluded to this before, fitting digital controls at sentinel outlets, certainly the furthest within each department, and monitoring would be, give you strategic flushing control over those areas. So it's pulling water through the whole system. And because you can time and you know the flow rate of these, that can be set so that you've actually cleared the pipe completely. So you know that you're not wasting water by flushing for too long. I mean, most hospitals will arbitrarily flush for 2 or 3 minutes, sometimes up to 5 minutes, and it may not be needed. If that outlet's been used before that, it's just not needed. With digital controls, you can work out what the flow rates are and how much water's gone through the outlet. So there's some real benefits there. And in fitting those small areas, you can consider that you don't have to retrofit the whole area. You can just do very strategic points that will help to start with. You can focus on verification. So you want to make sure the water's moving through the critical points regularly, and that the systems are being logged reliably. If you think modular, retrofitting, it doesn't have to mean repiping the whole system, the whole ward or department. So you can look at systems that can piggyback onto existing pipe work and integrate with your current systems. If you look at barriers, then power and data in older buildings where digital controls were never really thought about at that time. So running cables and power networks can be a real headache in those situations, especially in clinical areas where access is limited. So you've also got BMS limitations. Some sites have building management systems that are either maxed out or they're too basic to comply to adapt for these new systems. So you might need to upgrade or find a workaround. Physical access, as I've alluded to, getting the right outlets, especially in patient areas, can be tricky. If you've got you've got to balance technical need really with the clinical disruption. But on the whole, I can see that these can be very useful in those areas.
Yeah, great, thank you. I think that's lots of really practical steps there, especially as we know retrofit is, comes with different challenges to new build as well. So let's kind of think about looking ahead. With kind of advancements in technology, how might automation or predictive analytics further transform how estates teams manage water safety and compliance? And in addition, I guess, what future advances in digital product capabilities and functionality do you both see on the horizon? Adrian, let's hear your thoughts, and Harry, then please do jump in as well.
I think that it's not too big a step for us to jump into point of use temperature monitoring, where you're looking at the incoming hot, cold, and return temperatures, and then use the smart flushing functions within a digital product to identify that the temperatures, maybe the hot's got too cold and the cold's got too hot, and introduce automatic duty flushing to bring temperatures back up to an outlet. So, measuring the temperature of the water coming in, maybe it drops down to 50 degrees or even lower. By the digital product being able to recognize that and then start an automatic duty flush based on the incoming water temperatures, and then also send an alarm to the BMS system so that the engineers know that that particular instance has happened and that the product is duty flushing for a reason. And it might help you identify times of day within a hospital or a healthcare premise where your hot water temperatures is getting too low, or your cold water temperature is getting too high. And it might change the way that you're using your facilities management to keep those temperatures at the right temperature. Harry, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the future holds, some really big steps. Automation and predictive analysis, I think, can really help. And that can really, shift estates teams from reactive firefighting to proactive and risk management with smarter tools and clearer insight. For teams, just starting out, the key is to start small, as we've said, and stay practical. And use the technology to the best advantage. But I think what you were alluding to there, Adrian, was like predictive flushing schedules where the systems can actually monitor and see when things are going slightly out of kilter from temperature wise, and then can automatically move the water around to where it's needed. And I think trend-based forecasting can be really good in areas where they know at certain times of the day that the monitoring systems will be able to predict that temperatures are going to rise or reduce at a certain time and pull the water through. And I think integrating within the wider estate, combining water data with room occupancy and maintenance logs and clinical schedules could help teams prioritize interventions where they matter the most. So I can see some really exciting technology coming forward, certainly with the introduction of AI, which can actually intelligently predict these things.
I think one of the other things is that if you link everything together via the BMS, you can control other products that are within or help provide information to other products that are within the hot and cold water system to make sure that everything's at the right temperature at the right time. Things like boilers, things like pumps, you might be able to raise or lower the speed of the pumps based on the water temperatures going around the building.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you alluded to before about hot and cold water being flushed. Predominantly within hospitals, it's mainly the the cold water that requires flushing. The hot, not so much. If it's on a good recirculatory system, you'd only really need to flush the hot if it's on a lateral system, which mimics the cold, so it's not recirculatory. But I think many hospitals tend to flush both the hot and the cold equal amounts. And usually that's not necessary. It's predominantly the cold where the issue lies. And of course, movement of water like this will help to reduce biofilm within the pipework system. It's never going to eliminate it. But if there's a secondary system, as I mentioned before, then those chemicals are being pulled through, especially if you're utilising the sentinel furthest outlets in that site. These will ensure that that secondary chemical is actually being brought through at the correct levels and maintained.
Thank you. It definitely feels it's a very exciting space with lots of technology innovations coming through as well. So just to kind of finish with our closing question, for healthcare estates teams that are just beginning their digital water management and digital transformation journey, what advice would you give? Harry, let's start with you on this one, and then Adrian, please share your thoughts as well.
So my views on this is for estates teams just starting out really is to start small and use key areas, as we've said before, using the the sentinel points as being the main areas. A lot of hospitals have issues where sentinel points have been chosen by risk assessors with the ceiling tiles already in place, and it's almost impossible to work out where your sentinel points are from that. You really do need to go back to your drawings and work out where the actual sentinel points are, and then ensure that the furthest points are covered by these automated outlets. So that's where you're going to get the higher benefit, and it's easier to justify when you're the cost of installing these in those areas. So pick systems that give you usable data. So not just pretty dashboards, it has to be useful and meaningful data. Don't digitize everything at once. Prove the value in one area and then scale up. Hybrid systems are fine. So digital where it counts and manual where it works are very useful. Bring clinical and governance teams in the loop early. Discuss this with them. So your water safety groups, make sure that they're aware of it. And this builds trust and momentum. And then choose tech that choose tech that fits your estate, not the other way around. And I think those are really important issues.
Yeah,
do you agree with that, Adrian?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think start small, build your own trust in the system. Don't be scared of digital. I think one of the standout things for me in our industry is we're pretty averse to change, and it takes a little while for, if you kick the dinosaur's toe, for it to actually get to the actual head. But once you start using digital products, everybody that I've ever dealt with has always had positive feedback, even though, you know, there's some pushback against it to begin with. Maybe from the plumber has been with us for 45 years and he's always installed manual taps. Once you've installed it, you'll find that it's just the same as installing a mechanical product. It's dead easy. There's nothing strange about it, apart from you have to put a power supply to it. And we've always had positive feedback, particularly in areas where they've had instances, you've done your water quality testing, there's been high TVC counts. By introducing something that is flexible, you can start controlling those areas very quickly and reducing the TVC counts. Whereas if you just go on with a mechanical system, it takes people time and money to just work the way through. So start small, have a trial. Everybody I've ever spoken to and everybody I've ever dealt with, I think 99 out of 100 have always come back with positive feedback without any issues.
Yeah, I think a lot of the stigma is about the old digital taps that you talked about very early on, where they were basically used for very, very high turnover areas like airports, motorway service stations, things like that, that only had a very, very short run, 12 seconds, 10 seconds in some cases, when a clinical hand wash is at least 30 seconds and surgeon scrubs considerably longer. So I think there's a lot of stigma around the old type valves. I mean, valves of just 15 years ago are completely different to the new valves and the technology of today, where I think some manufacturers have certainly listened to what needs to happen in healthcare, and they've looked at the HTMs and tried to follow it. So I think the advancements in digital technology for taps now is certainly at a place where they are a tool that can be used quite well in situations to not only to overcome issues, but also to prevent them in the first place.
Yeah, I think it's the pushback is you're exactly right. It's the stigma that goes with the standard no touch tap. It's a completely different system.
Thank you, Harry and Adrian, for sharing your insights and experiences and wealth of knowledge in this space. It's clear that digital water management is reshaping how estates teams approach safety, compliance and sustainability, and that the future holds even greater potential for innovation. So we'll now be moving on to our Q&A hosted by Niamh Marriott, editor of Health Estates Journal.
Thank you all three of you for your presentation just then. I'll just give you a second to load up. We've got a whole host of questions that have come through. Just waiting on Harry's video. I think maybe we could start with a question for you, Adrian. There's been quite a few questions about compliance. Somebody's asked, you've mentioned the benefits of automation, but how can estates teams make sure the data being collected actually drives action rather than just adding to an already full compliance workload?
I guess it relies on the estates teams to look at the data logging, look at the recording, excuse me, identify trends, and then using those trends to recognise and look at what needs to be changed and how it needs to be changed. In some instances, you might find that they need to go and talk to ward staff and say, this particular area is not being used, can we remove it? But if the estates team use the data, then they can make a case for either removing duty flushing, removing a product. It's all about how the estates teams pick up the data, use it to their benefit, rather than just sitting on it. I mean, you can get data and data and data, but if you don't actually pick it up and use it, then it's a fairly pointless thing to have. But it does let you identify what needs to be changed and what's working and what isn't working. And that's how it will drive change. You just have to use it.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I mean, we've got quite a few questions coming through about the data itself and the kind of cybersecurity and digital risks of having the data. So maybe, Harry, this could be a question for you. How can teams protect their systems while still using these smart monitoring remote access systems? You know, what are the main cybersecurity risks?
So with cybersecurity, I mean, it's a fair concern. As we connect more water systems, more products to the network, we're expanding that digital footprint. So that means cybersecurity has to be a part of the conversation really from day one. So to protect systems while still benefiting from smart monitoring and remote access, estates teams really should work closely with digital governance teams and IT right from day one, right from the start. And it should be treated as any other critical infrastructure. Choose platforms with secure data encryption that use authentication and audit trails, not just fancy dashboards. Keep software and firmware updated. Make sure that remote access is limited to users with authorization and using correct procedures. And finally, ensure that resilience in the setup, that that resilience in the setup, where that's local data backups, offline flushing routines, and alerts are still triggered even if the network drops out. So smart monitoring, in my view, it doesn't mean taking risks. It means managing them better with the right safeguards. Estates teams can stay connected without compromising safety and compliance.
Sure. And in terms of these systems, there's a question about what the yearly maintenance costs might be for these kinds of products, for these taps. Don't know who wants to take the question on cost.
I'll take that one. The maintenance cost of a digital system is probably no more, and if not less, than your normal day-to-day maintenance costs for a mechanical system. A lot of it can be done automatically. There's no need to take the product apart. So it would be of a similar level, if not less, than your standard mechanical systems. I'd say potentially less, because you only need to clean the strainers. The digital valve will do the rest of it itself. So from a time point of view, it takes less time to maintain a digital product than it does a mechanical.
Sure. We've kind of got a question about the digital advances in terms of when you were talking about temperature control. There's a question, will this minimize the capacity water flushing? Is playing temperature gymnastics the best plan?
I think on that one, it's these devices can utilize the water system that you have. If your water system is fully operational and working to the correct temperatures, then these products can help drive that water through. So what you're really looking at here is if you've got an outlet, and I've seen this many times, that's being flushed a couple of times a day by staff, but it's actually being used 5 or 6 times a day by normal usage, then there's little point in actually flushing that outlet. And I think in a lot of cases, what hospitals do is they play safe. So what they do is they actually say, well, we're not sure it's being flushed, so let's flush it anyway. Well, with these devices, it will log the flushing, so you can see that it's being flushed, and you can actually reduce that flushing. If your temperature control if you're talking about your hot water, if your temperature control at your clarifier or your plate heat exchanger, whatever creates whatever your heat producing appliance is, if that's not at temperature, then these products are not going to help. They'll only help by drawing the water through and at least keeping it fresh. But if your water system's at the right temperature, then obviously the hot water will be dragged through, really quickly. And again, for your cold, if your cold water's at the right temperature, if you place these products at strategic points, and what I mean by that is the furthest sentinel points where you can draw the water through from your tank all the way through to the end of the tank. Providing your tank's at the right temperature, then this will really pull the water through so that everywhere else just is shorter runs, so the whole system reduces in temperature. So I think placing these at those furthest sentinel points can be a real benefit.
Yeah, thank you for that. We've got a question about Legionella. How precisely can digital water controls detect and mitigate Legionella risk?
Do you want me to start with that one, Adrian?
Yeah, please.
They can't really. I mean, the Legionella, if you've got Legionella in your system, and let's be honest, Legionella's everywhere. It's in most water systems, but it's at very low levels. And if you're using your system correctly and you're keeping it at the right temperature, so keeping it hot will kill it if the water's hot enough. Keeping it cold won't kill it, but it will keep it dormant. It will stop it from growing and manifest it into something that's really dangerous. And then the final key is keeping it moving. So if you're keeping that system moving, you're keeping the water fresh, you're stopping stagnation, you're making sure the water's staying at the correct temperatures to either kill or reduce growth. And if you've got disinfectant in your water, and every system in the country, if you're using a municipal supply for water, then it will have a low level of chlorine or monochloramine in there anyway. So you're bringing that fresh treatment through. So moving the water is one of the key advantages, and that's just why flushing is such an important part. If a tap is being underused, then flushing, bringing fresh water through at the correct temperature will definitely reduce any bacterial growth in the system. Allowing it to stagnate and allowing the water to rise in temperature or cool down if it's hot is going to start causing you the problems. So with these devices, you're not relying on humans anymore to do the flushing, and that's hit and miss at best. If you've got people that are doing flushing absolutely sterlingly, then credit to them. But anybody who's ever tried flushing an outlet, as I have many times, it is like it's soul destroying when you're doing that hour and hour throughout the day. So automated flushing really is a massive advantage if put in the right places. I mean, having these outlets everywhere would solve lots of problems, but if you can't afford that, and that's the big issue, then strategically placing them at the furthest sentinel points is the next best thing.
Yeah, sure, thank you. I guess on that there's a question around affordability, and for smaller hospitals or community sites that don't have huge estates teams, what's the best way to start adopting digital water management? Where are you going to get the most impact most quickly?
I think for community sites and for smaller hospitals that may not have their own estate team that are actually on site permanently, these things are a great benefit because you can have your duty flush regimes, your digital regimes set up that are working day to day for you. And it means that you don't have to rely on people going to do work for you, such as duty flushing the taps. The fact that you don't have to have it linked to the BMS, you can set up standalone networks that your potentially roving estates guys who are driving from site to site can then just go and plug in and pull off all the digital data logs and recording without having to link it to the BMS. Would be a massive advantage because it will give them the peace of mind that the work, as far as duty flushing is concerned, is being carried out without them having to visit site every day just to go and do a duty flush. They haven't got the time, they haven't got the availability to go and do that every day. The system will be managed for them, and then they can just draw off the data. But it will also identify for them when they go and do their checks what's working and what isn't. You know, you might find that there's a shower at the end of a community hospital or a community site that never gets used. It's to take it out or leave it in moment. And if it's not being used, take it out. It reduces the risk.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, there's nothing wrong
Harry.
with. Sorry, there's nothing wrong with hybrid systems where you've got a mixture of the two. So you can have, you know, as we've said many times now, we can put these at the furthest sentinel points, and you can have manual taps at other points. And if at least that way you know that the furthest sentinel point has pulled the water through to the end of line, and that way all the other flushing, just normal use of the other taps, if that tap is used, you know, just once a day, will at least bring that fresh water through and keep it cool. And I think for remote sites where you haven't got a permanent estate staff on site, you know, these are a real game changer, because remotely people can monitor water temperatures and send staff up there when it's absolutely necessary to do so. So there's some real advantages, I think, from these systems. And even, you know, a few connected outlets, you know, may bring a difference in compliance and team efficiency.
Yeah, absolutely. And making use of people's time more efficiently and making sure it's being used in the best way. In terms of compliance, we do have a couple of questions around regulation and compliance. One's about new hospital program. Does new hospitals program set standards or requirements around digital water management? I don't know who wants to take that one, maybe Adrian.
I think we're still waiting to see. I think the utopia would be that it does have digital water management. I think we're still at the design stage for the hot and cold water systems. Decisions are still to be made. I think in the ideal world, the whole of the program will be digitalised. If I can put my teeth in and say that. It's a goal. It's definitely a goal to get digital water systems into the new hospitals program, and hopefully that's where they'll go and they'll get the best benefit from it. We can certainly see ways forward that will help both in the building of the buildings and the management of the buildings. So digital, hopefully, will be put forward, and it's still a little bit wait and see to see what the design teams decide and what the estates teams decide for each individual hospital within that team.
Yeah, absolutely. I know New Hospitals Programme is talking a lot about digitisation being a big part of, you know, the 10-year plan and involving that in their design process, but still it's wait and see at the moment. Thank you. So another question is about technical memorandums. So what are the HTMs of most relevance to digital water controls? I'm not sure who wants to take that one.
Well, the HTM, going back to 2016 when it was last released, this is HTML 401 for water, part B. Just talk, and part A also talks about digital controls. It doesn't go in any great depth. It talks more about harnessing data, because if you've got a very large complex hospital and you've got hundreds, if not, you know, thousands of taps and outlets, keeping control of all those is really difficult. You do really need some kind of a software program to harness that information, to know where your products, what temperatures they've been at, where things are failing. It's almost impossible to do that manually on large complex sites. It's very time consuming. So having digital products with automated download of data that can be reviewed, and it's not just reviewing it, out of specification temperatures can be automatically highlighted, reports can be run. So all the things that the estates officers need in order to monitor water compliance is definitely a step forward. The new HTMs are scheduled for 2026. There has been an intervention between them, the new NTM document on non-tuberculosis mycobacterium, and they talk a lot about outlets and positioning of outlets, not so much digital controls of them. But the new hospital program has got some very well-known experts dealing with them, Dr. Mike Weinberg for one, and also Dr. Paul McDermott. So they're advising the hospital program. I'm not sure they're 100% listening to them, but they're certainly advising them.
Thank you. We got a question about testing. Can either Adrian or Harry, can you give some insight to dry testing over wet testing?
Dry testing of digital product is far easier and far easier to achieve than it is through a mechanical product, because the digital product uses thermistors to measure the temperature of the water. You don't have to use water in the product to set the temperature. The biggest issue with mechanical products and wet testing or dry testing is that you have to set the thermostat, and if you can't set the thermostat using water, it becomes really difficult to do. There may be ways around it by commissioning on site, but at the moment we don't seem to have found a solution to dry testing mechanical products. Although it's been worked on and people are looking at it, I don't think anybody's come up with an ideal solution for that. Whereas digital products, you only need to actually test the leak tightness of it, because the thermostatic testing can be set using the thermistor, so it doesn't have to be water tested. Whereas mechanical products, as it stands, I'll stand corrected if anybody's cracked it, has to be water tested just to get your thermostat set correctly and to give you your 41 degrees as a maximum at the outlet.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
There's far more flexibility around a digital product for manufacturing testing than there is around mechanical.
Thank you. Could you give any examples about how this system assists or better manages the commissioning phase of a new domestic water system? This is one of the later questions that's come in.
From experience, one of the benefits of digital, I mean, what the industry's trying to do is not fill large hot and cold water systems until the very last minute. But the usual commissioning stage of a hospital can last for many months. And once you've introduced the water into the system, then if you've got a mechanical system, then somebody is going to have to go and duty flush all of those products around the site until the building actually opens. So that's a manual job that someone's actually going to go around flushing every tap to make sure the water's moving. Nothing's allowed to stagnate in the site while the building's going through a commissioning phase. If you introduce a digital-based duty flushing regime that starts as soon as the water is introduced to the hot and cold water system, then you remove that. And you can also have recordings that tell you that it's been done. So if by using the digital system, you could save an absolute fortune in just not having people walking around building sites flushing taps all day, and probably save somebody's mental health of not having to walk around the building all day just flushing taps for 2 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. We've got a question about resilience. How resilient is the system? Are the operational controls for the water system uploaded for day-to-day management, or is it reliant on continued IT connectivity to a head end or server? What happens if the IT system fails? You know, nothing's foolproof. Technology is great when it works. What happens when it doesn't?
The product actually maintains its memory. So if the logging, which has been sent to the BMS, suddenly breaks, then the digital product actually keeps its own memory. So you will be able to at least recover some of the logs up to potentially a year's worth, even if it's not connected to the BMS.
Okay, super. That's good to know that the technology is not lost and it is saved. I've got another question. Can the details on an example digital product with auto flushing be shared? Can we talk about the auto flushing?
So I can give you a bit of an explanation of one that I dealt with a number of years ago, which was on a theatre scrub. So this theatre scrub, it was a fairly new theatre at the time. There were 2 sets of scrubs with 2 sets of, I think, 4 outlets on each scrub. And we'd done some Legionella testing in the area, and to our absolute amazement, we found Legionella in small numbers in one of the surgeon's scrubs, which we just couldn't believe because the amount of water that goes through there is absolutely phenomenal. What we did in the end, we found that the taps that had been installed were the very ones that Adrian was talking about at the beginning of the talk, which were only ran for 12 seconds. So the surgeon were having to continually restart the taps in order to complete their 5-minute wash. So what we did, we ripped them all out and we put an automated self-flushing tap in there that we could set the flushing regime for. And that's what we did on both sets of taps. We didn't really have to put flushing regimes in because of their actual usage. So what we did was we sat back and monitored, and we retested, and to our amazement, the same scrub came positive again for Legionnaire's disease. So we then were able to monitor the usage, and what we found was the ones on the right-hand side of the building were used as many times a day as you could imagine. On the ones on the left-hand side had no use whatsoever. They just were not getting used. So the surgeons, if you think about this, people have habit forming. When you go in a room to use a wash hand basin, people tend to use the same wash hand basin. Why is that? And that means because you've got a whole bank of them, some of them may not get used at all unless one's full and you have to use the other. And this was the case in this particular surgeon's scrub. So what we had to do, because we had an electronic tapping there that we could set the flushing regime for, we then put automated flushing on that. So if it wasn't used, it was automatically flushed. So we got the advantage of saving water, and also we were able to keep the water moving. And subsequent tests proved that Legionnaire's disease eventually disappeared from that outlet. And that's just, you know, who would think to flush a surgeon's scrub with the amount of water use that they get? But that was it, simple thing. The surgeons just preferred to use the one on the right than the one on the left.
Yeah, considering human behavior and how that kind of impacts the digital systems that you're implementing as well. That's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that, Harry. We've got a question about retrofitting, and we're going to have to come towards the end of our Q&A sessions shortly. So if anybody has any urgent questions, please do share them in the chat now. Harry, you talked about retrofitting, start small and smart. There's a question, a lot of healthcare buildings are still dealing with legacy infrastructure. How do you balance introducing digital water controls with older systems that just weren't designed for them? Is it realistic to retrofit effectively without major disruption?
Well, I think it is realistic, but you've got to start smart. You've really got to think about where you're going to fit these devices. In older sites where you've got older type buildings, they weren't designed to have cables run through. They weren't designed for network facilities to be pulled through. So you've got to think about where are these outlets going to give you the most benefit, and it's going to be those furthest sentinel points that you need to concentrate on. And there are a number of systems on the market. So you could use, in some cases now, if you can't get power there, you can't get network cables there, then you can use Wi-Fi devices. Obviously, you need your IT's permission to do that. And there are even battery operated devices that can be used that can help you get you out of this real infrastructure problem. But that's the keys really, is to start small, look and review where these strategic points are and make use of them. And that way you can expand them bit by bit once these devices have proved their worth. So once you install them, you'll be able to see the benefits of them and what increased benefits there are through moving the water and temperature control. And in that way, you're able to then say, well, this is where we can expand and use others, using all the the technology at your advantages. And what you need is something that's going to be beneficial, not something that's just got a flashy a front end that looks all brand new and seems to do all sorts of things. What you really need is something practical that gives you the very information, the logged information that you're after, which is really your temperature control and your movement of water. And that's how I would start. Look at what you're dealing with and then try and get the products that will fit around the obstacles that you have.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. There's a question from the presentation. Is the technology discussed currently available on the market? Can estates teams implement this technology already? Adrian, do you want to take that?
It already exists. As with all digital products, it advances, and we make advances to it as all the time. But all the products that we've talked about this morning, or the type of products that we've talked about this morning, they're in existence and can be installed tomorrow if you wanted to.
Brilliant, thank you. We've got a further question on HTMs. Are HTMs being updated to cover use of grey water and rainwater?
So I'm not absolutely sure about that. The HTMs that are being updated, grey water is always going to be problematic in a hospital setting. Outside of hospitals, grey water can be used. Grey water has also been used within hospitals in office accommodation, but that's not always appropriate, because if office staff never meet with clinical staff, then there's a high probability it's not going to cause a problem. But in lots of circumstances, clinical staff mingle with office staff, and if you've got clinical people, nurses and the like, going into areas where grey water is in use, then it has been known for the likes of Pseudomonas and other bacteria to be aerosolized onto their uniforms and then taken into patient areas, which is really problematic. So I can't actually see the use of grey water coming into hospitals. At this moment in time, the HTMs say not to do. As far as I'm aware, it's going to be the same in the new HTMs, but I can't speak for something that's not released yet, so I really don't know. My advice would always be to try and keep away from any use of grey water use in hospitals where wherever you can. There's always going to be the problem is that it's not clean enough. It's never going to be clean enough. And if you were to clean it to the level that it would need to be cleaned to, it probably would not be cost effective.
Yeah, sure. Right, thank you. We've just got time for just one more question. There's a question here about do you provide any on-site survey for providing feasibility of these systems? Is there any data, any case studies that people can look at that you guys have published or is available anywhere?
We have case studies that we can send over. We can also provide on-site surveys if somebody would like one.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining the webinar this morning, for asking all these questions to our speakers. It's been a great Q&A session. I just want to extend a big thanks to Adrian, Harry and Susanna as well for making the time to be here today and sharing your insights. It's really appreciated. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.